Good evening, welcome to another edition of the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton, and my co-host, Mr. Earl Buske, a program where we review the big stories making news every week, locally, regionally, and internationally, and we discuss some of the issues affecting the media. This week, as in every other week, there's no shortage of material to discuss across the board. Perhaps the more pressing issues will be elections, the budget or the absence of a budget debate, and perhaps how the media has been criticized for not jumping on that fact and carrying more stories on the way the budget debate, quote unquote, played out in Parliament this week.
Yeah, well, good evening, viewers, and thanks again for tuning in for another edition of our regular weekend review. Certainly, the issue of whether there will be or will not be a budget, it's already been described as the absence of a budget. None of us have read or heard any statement saying there will not be. It's simply that the Office of Parliament has indicated that it has not been informed by the Office of the Prime Minister, who is also Minister of Finance, as to when the debate will start or resume. Again, when we look at the way in which it has been covered, we see that there is a dearth of understanding on the part of the media, unfortunately, of the budget process, because for 3 to 4 years now, the process has been changed. The budget is no longer presented immediately after the throne speech and it's over and done in 2 or 3 days. The process now, it takes all of 1 month, it can take. And of course, in as much as there was reference in a newspaper article on Thursday raising the question as to whether there will or will not be a budget address this year or a budget discussion, I was left at the end of the article trying to figure out whether the article was about a budget debate, presentation and debate of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, presentation and discussion of the appropriations bill. All of these are steps included in what we normally call the budget process. And unlike before, for the last few years, you have had a situation where each house, meaning the upper and lower house, each gets 2 opportunities to discuss the budget, the presentation of the estimates and the appropriations bill. Then the MPs, unlike before, get to go home with it for days and come back. What I have not seen reported, but was seen by everybody who watched TV and heard by everybody who listened on radio on that day, the last day the budget exercise took place in the Parliament, was that strangely enough, after the presentation of the estimates of revenue and expenditure in the first round, and the first round of the debate started, interestingly, the former leader of the opposition and MP for Mikus South, Mr. Asin James, was the first to speak, and he said that it was his last address, and therefore he thanked all of his friends. And I found it strange because I knew that he had another round to deliver his last address, and he was corrected subsequently by the next speaker, the Minister of Education, who said to him, that was not your ultimate but your penultimate address. And but the way things played out later in the day, as the government and opposition spoke, the only 2 opposition persons who spoke were Mr. James, who spoke first, followed by Mr. Guy Joseph, who was the only other opposition MP to speak on the estimates of revenue and expenditure. And when in the night time, when everybody on the government side had finished speaking, there was nobody from the opposition to speak. And I can remember the Prime Minister saying to the Speaker that he has received no request from any opposition member to make reservation for him. The Speaker pointed out that the member for Castries Central was the only one who had indicated he would not be available, and therefore the Prime Minister ended up reluctantly, visibly, everybody knew he was sick, closing down the debate, that first round of the debate, on the estimates. Nobody got any clarification from the opposition as to whether it was a boycott or whether they decided simply not to be present when their time came to speak. But the very next day it was announced by the opposition that the United Workers' Party that it will be summoning a public meeting at which it will present its response to the budget. Now, there was I trying to figure out, how do you respond to a budget that you haven't had? How do you respond to a budget in public when you have selected not to respond in the House where it matters? As things played out on Thursday night of this week, the opposition presented its budgetary proposals and election promises in the boulevard, but still I have heard nothing about why there would be a situation as we face today where it is possible that the budget might not be presented. Because in my interpretation, the budget process was thwarted, was shut down, was closed down when the opposition decided to absent itself and allow the government, the majority, the yes, have the say and therefore approve the estimates of revenue and expenditure. Now, any government, all our government needs is approval of the estimates of revenue and expenditure. So it seems to me that once again, we in the press, in our coverage of the issue, we have been more reporting what the political players are saying, what the UWP is saying about what it feels the SLP has done in office. We repeat the questions. We repeat the questions. Headline, will there be a budget? Well, that's the question that everybody is hoping to get an answer from the press for. But when the press is repeating the question, that is what I tell you is the difference between reporters and journalists. A reporter reports what he said, she said, they said, they did. A journalist will take the look at the issue and try to provide the answers to the questions on people's minds. And unfortunately, that is not happening.
So we're not seeing the analysis and the interpretation.
No analysis. That we need to see. And it leads for me to conclude, as I've long done, that the people in the media covering the budget, unfortunately, are no much more conscious and aware of the changes that have taken place as the people who we are supposed to be informing. So when we don't know, just like the people who we are there to inform, then we're in a bad situation.
With you for a break, we'll take our first break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion looking at some of the other issues making the news this week and affecting the media. We'll be right back.